I'd always had an interest in writing, only as sort of just a keen amateur. And my sister-in-law is actually a Sunday Times best-selling author, and she picked up something that I saw that I'd written, and said, oh, this is really quite interesting. And it was actually an interesting topic of mine is things like past life regression, life after death, and subjects like that. And I've been sort of interested in that for 20 or 30 years, so I've been doing some research on that, and I'd just written a small piece about that, which then actually led on to me being a monthly columnist in a nationwide magazine for a year. I had a monthly column. And then it sort of spread into the book, Soul Trader, which talks about my experiences in looking into the aspects of life after death and do we or don't we live after we die, and spirit guides and reincarnation, all of these kind of questions that interested me. But also interspersed between looking for that is the interesting people that I've met on the market over those years. Particularly one chap who was called Jack Bell, who was an ex-musician, and he'd had a most interesting life, travelled all around the world, and had got to meet American presidents and had actually attended Frank Sinatra's funeral. But he was a really interesting character. So there's just funny little stories of my 27 years on the market as well, and the people I've met over that time. One of the big lessons I've learned from that is not to judge people as you see them. You know, sometimes when we all do it, it's just a natural thing. You look at somebody and instantly make a decision by how they're dressed or how they look as to how they are. But that's not always the full story. Once you get really to know people, there's, like I said, there's a few people I met who sadly passed on. One guy called Edward Lloyd, lovely man. And once I got to know him, I learned that he'd worked on the bouncing bomb with Barnes Wallis. He'd been instrumental in the development of radar. He'd known Glenn Miller and played in the Glenn Miller band and had dinner with Glenn Miller 2 days before he died. And you know, these are people that you wouldn't ordinarily meet, really fascinating people. And another chap who was telling me of his experiences in the Second World War. He was in North Africa, and he was driving out through the desert, and they came across a British tank that had been hit. He said, and there was one lad had survived. He said he was 17 years old. He said, I went to and held him in my arms, and he died in my arms calling for his mum. And, you know, when you get stories like that, it sort of brings you up into real life, and you think, yeah, you know, you'd never hear stories like that in any other place, and it's important. Yeah, it's important, these things. So the book sort of documented some of those stories, but they're more on the humorous side. It was more of a light-hearted take on life. Yeah. So Bruce Springsteen's actually got a copy of the book, as have some of the other members of his band. I'm a huge Springsteen fan, have been for 40 years. And in 2013, me and my son had a week in Ireland, sleeping in the back of the car, following the tour round. And we fell in with a guy called Jimmy, who was an Irish lad. And his brother was the local priest. And we were in Kilkenny, of all places. And Jimmy got a call on his phone from his brother saying, I think you'll find Springsteen's in the bowling alley over the road. So we tiptoed over the road, and there he was. And he came out, and we got to meet some of the band members and spoke to his manager and got to meet him, and my son got his autograph, and I managed to give him a copy of the book, which he seemed really interested in. So that was a good day. So even Bruce Springsteen's got a copy of it. I don't know what he thinks of it, but he's got a copy of it. Sometimes even when I go abroad, you'll get people who say, hey, you're the watchman from Palm Market. And a friend of mine, he used to come and work with me occasionally, was out in San Francisco, and he was outside of a hotel waiting for his wife to come out, and this chap was over the road. He said, and our eyes kept catching each other. Anyway, he said he walked over and he said, I know you. And Peter thought, well, you don't. He said, because I'm from Cornwall. He said, yeah, I do. He said, where are you from? He said, well, I'm from South Wales. He said, I know where I know you're from. So I've got a caravan down at Par. He said, you're the watchman on Palm Market. And he said, of all, you know, San Francisco of all places, and you still get recognised. So, yeah, far and wide.
Do you think you'll ever get bored of fixing watches and replacing straps?
I mean, doing the same thing day after day can be a bit repetitive. We're only here 3 days a week, so that's okay. But to be honest, no, I don't get bored with it, because it's just nice to meet people. If you're interested in people, then being on a market is a great place and a great way to get to meet people and to have a proper interaction with them. You know, you can have proper conversations. I've had some fantastic friends over the years, and you know, there's a chap who you might see on here, Harry. He's 94, a Normandy veteran who's still collecting money. He's become a really good friend of mine. There's other people I've met who spoke to me about their wartime experiences, and you know, so it's kind of you don't get to meet people like that every day. So it's really interesting and varied work. It's lovely. Well, they can either get the copy from me, or you can go onto the Amazon bookstore and you can either buy the paperback version, or you can get it on Kindle as well, which is interesting because you suddenly get an email saying that your book's been sold in New Zealand and Australia, and which is quite incredible, and China, and you think, wow. So yeah, so Palm Market is advertised worldwide.